TikTokers melt down over the strange notion that police unions might be supporting Donald Trump over Joe Biden, who hates law and order and hates cops. White Rural Rage, the controversial research book that we talked about a couple weeks ago, people are really talking about that, giving their feedback, especially one of the researchers. Trump 2024, the campaign releases a great new ad, and more leftists on TikTok acting crazy and criticizing old people because old people apparently suck. We really have gone beyond the Rubicon. Welcome back to the show, guys. We're going to start here. Speaking of white rural rage, we're going to see some
That's
kind
me.
of rage.
That's me. I'm white
Yeah.
and rural. That's me.
So there's a lot of
Ah!
white rural rage sitting next to me here. But speaking of rage of some sort, let's take a look at this lib on TikTok who we're a little bit worried about. We're a little bit worried about his mental state, and we want to see if he's doing okay. Here is a little tidbit of humor.
Are you kidding me? Tonight in Grand Rapids, multiple law enforcement officers stood behind Donald Trump as he spoke. People that are elected officials like sheriffs, others hired to protect and enforce the law for the entire citizenry, not for a political party, explicitly forbidden from being a partisan authoritarian police force standing on stage, entirely unethical, probably illegal, on top of which Donald Trump has been indicted 91 times. He's liable for sexual assault. His entire business was found to be fraudulent, and law enforcement have the fucking gall to stand on stage with him. Enough is enough. Gall stand on stage with him.
So I know you've seen this video before, but let me just start by asking one question. Is it news to this guy that unions do endorse political candidates? This isn't new. The teachers union is in the pocket of the Democrats. That's not new. So why is it shocking if police unions
I guess it's new that they endorse somebody he didn't agree with. Maybe
Right.
He actually broke out in a sweat, Chris. I don't remember the last time I was so mad that I broke out in a sweat.
I mean,
Even
my
with the
own-
whole squatter thing,
I was about to
I
say.
did break out in a sweat.
Yeah, you kept your cool better. Your house was just destroyed by a crackhead, and you kept your cool better than that guy. I mean, this is talk about, I don't know if he's rural or not, but there is some white liberal rage there for sure.
He didn't have an accent. I don't know, but that's some I mean, I don't think police officers are expressly forbidden from endorsing a candidate.
He
They
said it's
are
illegal. It should be illegal. He said it should be illegal or it is illegal. I think he was saying it is illegal.
I think he said it's illegal and expressly forbidden for them to endorse. Well, he said to endorse a dictator. I think, but I think the thing is they don't believe Trump is a dictator. Many people don't. So
Right.
you can't hold people to a law that, one, I don't think it exists, but two, is based on your opinion.
Well, here's the thing. If it existed, if a law existed that police organizations could not endorse a political candidate, that would have been a law broken every election cycle for decades and decades and decades. We always
Yes.
had police unions usually supporting the Republican Party. That was normally the case. And so now all of a sudden it's controversial and it's been
Unions
illegal.
always endorse somebody. Yeah, unions
Exactly.
endorse the auto workers union, the teachers union, the police union. Unions come out and endorse the candidate that's going to do best for them.
And not only is he upset about it, but it's been illegal this whole time, according to him. I guess you learn something new every day, right?
I don't think he does, but I try to. The thing is people get upset about that, but sheriffs, even an elected official, is allowed to endorse somebody. I mean, Congress and senators and mayors and governors all endorse other candidates. I don't understand. I mean, they're citizens. Citizens can support whoever they want. And so they're wearing their uniform. Their union is endorsing this candidate. I don't understand. Again, he broke out in a sweat. He was so mad. He's really mad about this.
I know my blood pressure went up watching it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I have heartburn now from. I mean, that's bad for your health, buddy. It's really bad for your Like,
I think it does make me laugh whenever I see, because I think conservatives usually have like some stereotypical view of how liberals act, but it's always funny and satisfying to me when an actual liberal acts exactly like a conservative stereotype of a liberal. Like that guy is acting like our stereotype of a liberal. And
yes.
maybe that means it's not such a stereotype and it's just true. I think that's an
Yeah.
indicator. But
Unfortunately, I also hate it though when conservatives act like a stereotype that the liberal has for us, and then I'm like, oh, so
that
sure.
happens. And that's why you were so hell bent to do this podcast with me, because I'm a minority.
Yes,
You wanted that
that's right.
diversity so you could break the mold.
Yes, I
But no, I
wanted to try
totally, I
and
totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's ridiculous when both sides do it. Um, and
he
I've,
just that's over the top, and I if you want to make it, I mean, I assume, because for me, when I talk about politics, I am usually trying to educate people. I think that they have shared a fact that's wrong, and I try to use historical information to say, this and that, or I'll say, this is my opinion, but I'm trying to get them to see my side and come
yeah,
over to my side. I'm not sure who he's going to win over with that. I
yeah. I
think the
mean,
people
like,
who are yeah, but you
I
know.
would say every time I've been successfully convinced by somebody, I'm usually not getting screamed at the top of the other person's lungs with spit flying in my face. It's just not the most persuasive way to get somebody on your side, exactly as you're saying. And obviously, this happens on both sides. I do think, speaking of this white rage, I know we talked last week about the controversial social science, quote unquote. I'm definitely using air quotes for the science part.
Yes.
The book White Rural Rage, which obviously
Hmm.
MSNBC promoted. They had the two authors on. They said that white rural voters are racist, xenophobic, anti-gay. They support political violence, and they support an executive branch.
I have a question.
Yes.
Um, is going, hey, all these people live here and they're horrible. Is that a form of bigotry, or is it me? Is that them being
Um,
bigots, or
it
am I
depends on
confused?
well, first of all, it depends not only on them having dark skin, but it also depends on them being liberal. It's only racist if the people you're criticizing are liberals. It's
Oh,
okay
okay.
to
So they're
do it
not
the
being
other way.
bigoted by saying, okay, so they're not being bigoted by saying, hey, people who live in this area that we've obviously never lived in or been to are ignorant and violent and prejudiced. That's not them being bigoted.
Of course not, because that would
That's
make too much
okay.
sense. It would
Okay.
make what you said
Okay.
makes too much sense. It can't possibly be true.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay.
But an interesting
Should I
development. The
start
reason
screaming about it? Should I start screaming about it?
so the
I
reason
don't
we're
think I
why
can be as sex.
yeah. So the reason we're bringing it up is there's actually development on this. I don't know if you remember the
Oh,
video we made last time. One of the authors said,
oh, I
"quote."
remember that video because I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
So one of the authors actually said, "We bring the receipts," meaning like everything they say in the book is so factual. But Politico, not exactly a right-wing organization, just
Not at
released an
all.
article, just released an op-ed written by one of the researchers whose research was cited in this book, and he had some interesting things to say.
So this is the
So,
guy who actually did the research and the numbers.
some of the
Are you
research, some of the research,
wait,
because
are you implying that he knows more about his research than two guys who wrote a book with a clear agenda? I'm sorry, is that what you're saying here? Because that seems
I know
absurd.
it's kind of a wild theory. It's kind of a wild
I
presumption.
mean,
I don't know
come
if
on.
it can be true, but you can be the judge. So this guy, he
Oh, I will
wrote
be.
he wrote a blistering op-ed against this book.
Hmm.
Um, and again, this guy
Okay.
he spent a lot of time in rural America. He studied these populations. He understands the context and the dynamics. And like all good researchers, because this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand about research, research doesn't always reveal causation. It's a
True.
good researcher um, will be forthcoming and state when a conclusion can't be drawn about the
Right.
research that they've done.
Hmm.
So this guy, his name is Nicholas F. Jacobs, and he wrote, and I quote, "Words matter, Rage and resentment are not interchangeable terms because the whole point of this book, it was built on the word rage, that white rural voters are somehow raging people, they're irrational. So he goes on to say the following: rage implies irrationality, anger that is unjustified and out of proportion. You can't talk to somebody who is enraged. Resentment is rational, a reaction based on some sort of negative experience. You may not agree that someone has been treated unfairly, but there's room to empathize. So in other words, there's room to empathize when you're talking about resentment. Rage, it sets up a lack of empathy because you're just painting a certain group as being irrational, inconsolable, unable to be
Yes.
reasoned with. So then he goes on to say, research by both me and others has illuminated how resentment is driven by the complex rural identity that, while occasionally intersecting with national political currents, is rooted in the unique context of rural life. Rage, both as a soundbite and as presented in the book, oversimplifies and misrepresents these debates. And so does the assumption that all the holders of these views are white. So he's saying it's not just based on skin color, and that this rage is motivated by racism. Racism exists in all parts of the country and is embedded in American politics. But what the research shows is that while there are deep and persistent racial resentments in rural communities, despite a slight correlation between the two, rural resentment is an attitude distinct from racial prejudice. And that's very important because this book
Yes.
painted them as synonymous. First of all, that rage and rational resentment are the same thing, and
They're
resentment
not.
and racism are the same thing somehow. Or rather,
No.
resentment against elitism is somehow inherently the same thing as racism, which is completely untrue. So I was glad to see this guy write this.
Yeah.
He didn't do a rant
Yeah.
or an emotional, fuck you to these authors. He laid out his case
Yeah.
why he thought he was mis kind of why his research was mischaracterized, and I think it was a good clapback, and I think people need to see that.
Yeah, they do. And there is, as somebody who grew up in the South, in rural America, who had family who were in rural America, I've seen this grow, that there is a growing elitism in the United States among the press, among Hollywood, among Washington, and that there is a resentment in rural America because I remember the first time they started calling it flyover country. Oh, those are just flyover states. That the coast is all that matters, New York and California. And of course there's a resentment because middle class America, rural America, the people who are in flyover country are the backbone of this country.
Absolutely,
We're,
and I
you
want
know, we're the ones who make it run. And to be told that your opinion doesn't matter, that you don't know what you're talking about, to not be listened to, of course, breeds resentment.
and you know what?
And
I want to go a little bit further in dissecting language that we hear our politicians use, because one of the things I've noticed just watching, a bunch of election cycles and just watching how usually and this is politicians on both sides, not just the left. You hear both the left and the right when they're talking about poor people and minorities. They usually use the term inner city to describe the people they're concerned about. And inner city has, and I think we should worry about the inner cities. The inner cities are a mess. And I think, but what I think that implies is when you use the term inner city, you're automatically implying urban and metropolitan, and you're ignoring that there
yeah,
are also poor people in rural America too that may need help, that may need attention from the government. And I think even though there's good intention in caring for our inner city youth, inner city crime, it automatically excludes a huge subsegment of the poor.
yeah.
And I see both parties doing it. It's not just the left. Both parties talk
Oh, yeah,
about the
both
inner
parties,
cities.
yeah. Rural America is by and far and wide ignored by both parties
Yeah.
in a good way, in a bad. They are not included in the conversations. They are not taken into consideration. They are not campaign. People don't stop and campaign there unless they're a congressman. People don't talk about bills for rural America. That's where our farmers are. That's where our cattle guys are. That's where a lot of our factory workers are. we're talking about the people who make this country run being ignored and treated as less than, because of where they live or what they do for a living. And it's really it's disgusting. I come from a very blue collar family. My generation was the first generation that anybody went to college, but my grandfathers worked, and so did my uncles, and
Yeah.
they took care of their families, and the idea that their voice should not be heard, is absurd, because they're rural Americans who do blue collar work. That's what most Americans are, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I get there is a resentment. I have that resentment. I mean, I'm going through that now, Chris, where I am constantly frustrated as a regular old American citizen. Nobody seems to give a crap that my house is destroyed, and I can't get people to respond, and it's no big deal, and blah blah blah, and we're worried about the criminal. And a lot of resentment comes from that. And I hear that from
Yeah.
people who were commenting that they don't care about us. That is one of the most common phrases I've started hearing from people. They don't care about us. They, the government, don't care about us. And they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
They don't. They don't
And-
care about the everyday American. Because
And you know
we
what?
don't make rural Americans who work for a living don't make front page news.
And you know what? You see this working its way kind of into all political issues, even issues that don't seem to be a necessary divide between rural and non-rural. Because, like for example, I think, I think one of the things in this article, because I actually read the whole article, it's a very interesting article. What you see a lot is that, hold on, I'm going to restate what I'm saying. One of the things that this article talked about, and because I read through the whole article, it was a very interesting article, is that one of the resentments that rural America has, and this is what this researcher was saying in terms of his findings, was that rural America has a very strong emotional reaction when they feel that their values are being overtly disrespected by the powers
Yes.
that be in Washington. And that's something that transcends race. That transcends skin color and all these other petty demographics. This is a whole section of the country which is predominantly Christian, and when they're told election cycle after election cycle, first of all, they're left out of the conversation, as you said, but then they're told they have that their taxes have to fund abortions and all these types of things, and if they aren't okay with that, then
they're painted as they're painted as
Yeah.
extremists, right? Oh,
Exactly.
Christian nationalism is a dangerous thing. And the idea that because somebody goes to church that they want to overthrow the government or they want to see America fail, is absurd.
Yeah,
right?
and I want to say,
I mean,
we had a president, before Trump, when we had during the Obama years, he was hesitant to even say radical Islam extremism for terrorism. He wouldn't even really say that term because it was offensive to say radical Islam, but it's so commonplace to say Christian nationalism. Like there's a huge double standard there. And then I also want to point out, and this is something that just popped into my head as we were talking.
that's because Christian nationalists, for as dangerous as they claim that Christians are, don't go around blowing everything up. They just
Exactly.
I mean, you've had a few, but the churches condemn them. But in general, you don't have to worry about that happening. And Jimmy Carr's a comedian you love, and he had one of the
Yeah.
best lines. He was making fun of a guy that was a Christian, and he told him, he said, "Ooh, what are you going to do? Forgive me?" And the other guy in the audience said, "Why do you make fun of Islam?" He goes, "Because they don't forgive you." So,
Right,
I mean, that's just all right there. Woo, what are you going to do? Forgive me? Yeah. So it's very easy to criticize and come after Christians when our reaction is not to, hey, we're going to, declare a jihad and go after your whole family.
Exactly. And I want to go a step further that, we talk about these elites who kind of snub flyover country. One of the things I've noticed as I've been following politics on both the left and the right, and news coverage especially, is the flyover country doesn't even really get negative attention very much either. It just gets no attention. And one of the things I've realized, because what I was thinking was, we all know who Gavin Newsom is, right? We all know who Ron DeSantis is, right? We all knew who Greg Abbott. We all know
Yep.
who Greg Abbott is because of the border situation. But a lot of these states, like there are a bunch of governors in flyover country that I couldn't tell you who they are, even though I'm sure they've done great things for their states and that they've led, good administrations and gotten good bills passed. Because I know there have been similar bills to what's gone on in Florida and Texas adopted in a bunch of these red flyover country states. But you don't even hear the negative press about them. You don't hear anything about them at all. Like I just learned a few months ago who Kevin Stitt was, the governor of Oklahoma, because he passed a really strict abortion bill. But beyond that, I couldn't even name some of these governors. I feel like we had Kim Reynolds, who I've grown to really respect as a governor, but she only made headlines because she endorsed Ron DeSantis, and then she was caught up in the feud between DeSantis and Trump in the primaries. But beyond that, I don't think we've seen coverage of Kim Reynolds in terms of anything she's done. And I think we know who Kristi Noem is because she's been a vocal ally of Trump. But I'm not
Right.
convinced how much you know about some of these, political figures who are working just as hard for their states as Ron DeSantis
Yep.
or Greg Abbott. But you just
Yep.
don't see the coverage unless they do something really, really out of the ordinary. You just don't hear a lot about them.
No, those states are ignored, and like I said, they're considered flyover country. And I remember that was very controversial. Somebody said that, and people got in an uproar. But they've continued to use it, and it is very. You hear that now with people talking about that should these people be allowed to vote, and and like even the guy said on the interview, these people. The funniest line to me ever is letting these people vote is a danger to democracy. I'm sorry, letting people vote is a danger to democracy.
Yeah, and these are the same people that'll say voter ID is racist.
Yeah, and I'm
They'll
like,
say voter ID is a threat to democracy, right? But taking
Yeah.
a whole demographic based on skin color and location and restricting their vote, that's fine.
yeah, that's fine, that's fine. And I'm like, but only letting people that agree with you vote is not democracy. Maybe you don't know
Right.
what democracy is, because democracy is letting people vote whether you agree with them or not. And so
Yes.
I am astounded at the blatant elitism to say that this group of people I don't think are intelligent enough to vote and don't think like me. And I also love the assumption that if you don't think like these people, then you're obviously an idiot. Like they are the arbiter of intelligence, and there's no chance in the world they could be wrong about anything.
Well, you
Like
see
they
these.
were wrong.
Well, I don't
They
know if
were
you
wrong.
saw. I don't know if you saw. Hopefully, you didn't see it because I'll think better of you if you didn't see it. Sonny
Okay.
Hostin on The View just a day or two ago said that the solar eclipse was because of climate change. And I was debating about putting that in here because, but all the other hosts, the Daily Wire guys, all those people hit it up already. It's been talked to death.
Oh, what?
But she said, this mathematical phenomenon that happens, that was gonna happen regardless, that's happened before, that's
And we'll happen again.
and will happen again on a predictable interval because of what we know about astronomy
Yeah.
and our solar system. Somehow it happened because of climate change. And it was interesting. Even Whoopi Goldberg tried to put her in her place and said, "Come on, like that's ridiculous." So, but these are the elites that are apparently smarter than all of us, right? The solar
Yes.
eclipse is caused by climate change, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, again, it's that attitude of I am the arbiter of intelligence. And here's the thing: I'm not saying these people aren't intelligent. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But the idea that you have enough information to make that call that this person, is not intelligent, doesn't know anything, or shouldn't be allowed to vote, is to imply that you understand their life and experiences, right?
And
So
that your worldview is inherently totally invaluable to an insurmountable
yes,
level, but that their
that
worldview shouldn't even be represented at all in any
and,
level.
and that you know and understand their worldview well enough to
Right, to make
justify
that
it,
decision,
right?
to make that decision
You're,
for
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yes, you're actually saying, I understand what it means to be a rural American. I understand why they feel this way. I understand their experiences in every part of their life, and I know that this is invalid. That is the height of arrogance and narcissism to me. That's the height of elitism. And one of the things I had to learn as I grew in politics is when people would disagree with me and I'd want to fight with them, I started asking questions a lot. And now on TikTok, I'll get in, but when I'm talking to friends and stuff, a lot of times I just ask them, "Oh, well, can I ask what happened? Have you ever experienced that or what?" And what I found is a lot of times people's political beliefs are very closely held to personal experiences or family experiences, right? And so they may have had someone in their family who was assaulted and needed to terminate and terminated a pregnancy. And so they have a different point of view than somebody who wasn't there, right? Or they may feel differently about unemployment because they wanted an extension because they had different problems or disability or whatever the case may be. But a lot of people have some personal experience that tends to solidify, not all, what they believe. And so trying to understand that, you can, sometimes talk to people. But the idea that these guys understand everybody in rural America and why they feel the way they do and their experience, I highly doubt it. And I think the thing that really comes across is your experience doesn't matter. It's not that I understand it and know where you're coming from and can say that you're wrong. It's that you're not worthy of being understood.
Yeah.
Your experience doesn't matter. It's dehumanizing. It's very dehumanizing. Very dehumanizing.
Absolutely. And you know what? It just reminds me, Michael Knowles, I know you're your best friend. I think you're familiar with him.
Michael Knowles and I are best friends. He doesn't know that yet, but I think he's starting to figure it out. I think he's a smart guy. He'll figure it out. He knows we're best buds.
So he actually says a phrase that I want to repeat here because this conversation reminds me of it. He always says, Ben Shapiro says facts don't care about your feelings.
Yep.
Michael Knowles says facts don't care about your feelings, but politics almost exclusively cares about your feelings. And I think that's totally true. And I think it's something that the elites in both parties don't understand. And I really mean both parties. The left, the right.
Let's not kid ourselves, okay? When we say elites, I mean the people in Washington in both parties.
Yeah.
There may be a few on both sides. I think there's probably some true believers up there in both parties. But 99% of the people in Washington are elitist snobs who don't give a crap about you other than can they squeeze another nickel out and figure out how to run your life. And I mean that fully for Democrats and Republicans. I think that very few of them are there because they give a crap about the American people. And they prove that consistently over and over and over again. If you don't believe me, just look at the history since I was born in the 90s. Okay, the 70s. At any given time, you can look back and see there are times when Democrats have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And yet none of them have ever implemented the plans that they claim they want to do that would solve problems in America.
Yeah.
Because they need something to argue about. But think about it. They could go in and say, we've got the answer for America. We're going to put all of this in because we control, these three areas. And they don't. Neither one of them have done it because they don't want your life to be better. They don't want to help you. They want power. And wanting power is so much more offensive to me than wanting money. Because here's the thing. There's enough money to go around, right? Both of us can be rich, right? It's not an either or. There is only so much power. And so in order for you to have power, you have to take it from someone.
Yes.
So we have a bunch of power-hungry people up there. And the only way they can get what they want, which is power, is to take it from us. And that is why...
And you know what? Just from a pragmatic perspective, you can't get reelected unless there's something still left to do that you haven't done, that you have to run on. And that's where the power comes in. You have to,
well,
in order to get...
if you had any creativity. But they lack creativity. Remember what I told you? You could read the book The Road to Serfdom where it talks about that government attracts the most mediocre of people. And I think we see that. Dennis Miller said it best. When I look out over the Senate and Congress, I see a sea of mediocrity.
Yeah, well,
yes,
I think
these are not creative people. These aren't our best of our best.
Exactly, and there are plenty of shitty governors and governor bureaucrats, but I've always felt that governors can affect so much more change than any president can because they and not to say that governors never get power hungry or governors never play politics, because they do, but
Oh yeah, sure.
but they are at least living in their home state and
Yes.
have to run into constituents. And I think
Yes.
we spoke about this another time, that you had said, and I thought it was brilliant, that if you're going to be in Congress, that you should be mandated to travel home a certain percentage of the time and meet with constituents, because it's become optional. That's become an afterthought going back home. A lot of these people, like I heard, I don't know if you heard, I think Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin, and one of the other guys all share a townhouse together in D.C. and they never go home. So,
Yeah.
and why would
Well,
why should they? They're all
yeah,
in
because the
state.
power and the money is in Washington, and they know they've got it locked down in their area because they keep going back to the same. Oh, we can't do this because of the Republicans, even if they weren't in power. And the Republicans do the same thing. Oh, we couldn't get it passed. You're running everything. You literally have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and you can't get legislation passed. You're idiots. All of
Yeah.
it. And so that's what I was saying. When has either party, when they've had the opportunity to make the significant change they want for people, actually done it? They don't. They wait
Exactly.
until they can't do it. That's just like the Republicans infuriated me when they passed the flat tax bill. Who gives a damn? You don't control the Senate. You don't control the presidency. It's not going to go anywhere. Great tax reform for no reason at all. And this is what I love. This shows you how elite they think that we're stupid enough to believe they did something, that they meant that. Like, I'm dumb enough. I'm not a genius, but like, I am so stupid in rural America. Well, they tried to pass a flat tax, but Democrats
What?
stopped it. Morons, you could have done it when Trump was president. You didn't even bring it up. You did it now because you don't want tax reform. That's why you did it. So they're all elitists. I have no use for them in Washington. The more they're up there, and the more I hear them, or what I realize we just have and that's why, Chris, they are terrified of this convention of states, because
Yeah.
if the American
yeah.
people realize, wait a minute, I can rein these fools in, oh, they're in trouble, and they know they're in trouble. They know they're in trouble. But yeah,
Absolutely.
this whole thing, and Democrats do the same. Well, we wanted to pass it, but notice how they'll pass a big bill when they don't have enough control to get it through. They're all up there behind closed doors together.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
remember
it
even
cracks me up. People have this loyalty to a party. I'm like, that party would sell you down the river in a heartbeat. Okay? Be loyal to your fellow citizens. That's who you need
Yeah.
to be loyal to.
yeah, absolutely. And speaking of politics, we're in a very divisive, again, election cycle between Biden and Trump. I don't think it's any secret, given those two options, who we're supporting in this election. But both sides are full of baloney. But I will say there are some really good, and I'm kind of a nerd for like campaign ads, even though all campaign ads are biased and bullshit. I love watching them. I think because I'm a marketer, so the marketer in me loves campaign ads.
They matter. And let me
Yeah.
tell you, I'll tell you how much they matter. I'm going to tell you a story I heard one time about Ronald Reagan, because
Sure.
I love him. So it was it Bill Bennett? It was one of the Bennett brothers who've been in politics forever, was running Dukakis, Carter's campaign against Reagan. So that was the first time he ran. And he said he would always get up early and get to the campaign office like at 4:30 in the morning, right? And because he wanted to see, he said, so I come in, I get my coffee, I turn on the TV. He said, and this commercial comes on, and I remember this commercial. And he said, and it's the Olympic runner, because it was the year of the Olympics. He said, and he's running through rural America on a farm, right? And he said, and he's running through this cornfield, and the sun's coming up over the golden, the amber waves of grain. He said, and there's a farmer and his son standing on the fence, and they're waving little American flags, and the Olympic runner comes by, he's carrying the flame, and they're waving flags, and it says, and he said, and I was in tears. He said, it was so beautiful. It was so patriotic. Nothing was being said. They were just, playing the music. He said, and the screen went black, and it said, it's morning again in America. Vote for Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I've seen
He
it.
said, and that ad was so powerful. He said, I closed the office and went home and went to bed for 3 days. He said, I do. He said, we're done. So campaign ads, when they're good, matter. He said, because I knew we can't beat this. We can't. He said, they made me cry.
Well, I mean, I think that's like Michael says, facts don't care about your feelings, but politics does, and that's why campaign ads exist, because they are playing to your feelings. So, President Trump,
Yeah, all about a minute.
exactly, and President Trump released a new ad. Let's see, we're now. I guess it was 5 days
I
ago
have
now.
not seen this, so I'm interested.
Yeah, so it's a good ad. I think it's a good ad, and I think it's obviously cherry picked and biased, but I think there's truth in it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna show this ad here.
This is the Jim Heath Channel playlist of 2024 campaign ads.
Press always asks me, don't I wish I were debating him? No, I wish we were in high school, I could take him behind the gym. That's what I wish. I said, no. I said, if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
That you cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
President Walker, how do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
When they go low, we kick them.
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Please, get up in the face of some Congress people.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
So the first thing I always think of when somebody brings up January 6th is I always think of these things, right? Because like when he said, are protesters supposed to be nice? Well, apparently if they don't want to go to jail in Washington. So, I mean, there's uprisings everywhere. I think the problem with this is, this attitude is, these are your fellow citizens. We have lost the idea that somehow political disagreement somehow means somebody is not a citizen of this. This is your fellow citizen, right? I may disagree with your politics, but if somebody invaded our country, I'd fight to the death next to you to defend this country. Yep. If you wanted to, if you were somebody who wanted. But we have this idea that somehow, because first of all, that because somebody disagrees with us, we should be able to be violent with them is absurd, right? Yep. I mean, we have free speech, and while the government is not the one to suppress it, we have it all over. And the idea that because I say something you don't like means I deserve to be harmed, it feeds into that elitism, but it's absurd. It's absolutely insane.
Well, part of the irony here is also, I mean, if you remember, the guys who wrote White Rural Rage said it's the white rural voters that support political violence and think it's justified. Meanwhile, we see all these are the liberal elites from metropolitan areas that are saying we should have uprisings. You should get in the face of an elected official and block them from leaving. I mean, that's what Maxine Waters was saying in that clip. Yeah. If you see somebody from Trump's cabinet form a crowd and intimidate them physically, that's what she's saying. So these are the people that are stoking.
Well, I think what amazes me about this is that I constantly hear people throw out the word Nazi, but this is very brown shirt, very black shirt from fascism, right? Yeah. And it's funny to me because people somehow think that a government, and it can be, but that in fascism, a government is overthrown by violence. Like there's an uprising and the military comes, and it's not. Both what Mussolini did and Hitler did was they simply intimidated and silenced the opposition to the point that they were in power, and then they started locking everybody up, right? But they made it so dangerous to speak out against them, to serve in the government when you didn't agree with them, that people stopped talking. and they would not speak out because their businesses were destroyed. They were our version of a tax audit, but they would go after them to destroy their business. They would bankrupt them. They would frame them for crimes. They would intimidate, if somebody tried to get out and speak, the black shirts and the brown shirts would show up and they would be violent and not just threaten the person speaking, but the people supporting that speaker, until the point that people were afraid and intimidated. And this call for one set of citizens to intimidate and terrify another set of citizens is exactly the playbook that was used when they gave up democracy in Italy and Germany. Silencing didn't start with the government. It started by encouraging citizens to harm other citizens. So this is a very dangerous, if we look back through history, this is very dangerous. It's very dangerous to radicalize one group of citizens against another, because what you're doing is saying to one group of citizens, you can dehumanize these other people, their rights don't matter. And then when you start arresting them and putting them in jail and destroying their families and taking their businesses, you've got one group saying, well, they deserve that. Why? Because they disagree with you? That's really all this comes down to. They just disagree with you.
Yep.
That's all politics is. They're ideas that are different. Do they have outcomes? Yes, but that's why we vote. But ultimately, you're just talking about a different political philosophy, and your answer is to terrify these people to they're afraid to speak up and go out. It's insane. Yeah. It's insane. It's disturbing, is what it is.
Absolutely. So we know that a lot of people on the left, they hate white rural voters, they hate Republicans, they hate Trump. There's one other group that they hate, and this is what we're going to close on. They hate anybody born before 1965.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, and we know this because TikTok tells us so. So we're going to close on a little bit of a lighthearted note here. We like reacting to these bozos, as I call them, because they are bozos. And we might not really care what they have to say, but it does give us a laugh. Let's see what this woman says about boomers.
Fellow Gen Xers, what are we doing with the baby boomers? Are we still correcting them like they're gonna come back from it, or are we just letting it go? Because I feel like after the 4th, 5th, 6th, 100th time, I have to be like, oh, Mom, we probably shouldn't really say that anymore.
So first of all, what do you correct? She'd have to narrow it down for me of what specifically are you correcting them on, right?
That's number one. Go ahead first.
Yeah. And I made a response to this because I found this video just very smug, and I did not like it. So.
And smug people are one of those things that grinds your gears no matter what they're saying.
Right.
The thing that always amazes me, as a relatively young person myself, is I know one day I'm not going to be young, and I don't get people like that. Like, do they think they're not going to be old one day and have kids of their own?
Do you think you're going to be hip and know everything that's going on? Because you're not. Because my nieces and nephews say stuff to me, and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like I said, they laugh at me all the time, and I'm like, "What are you talking?" Like they throw out words or whatever, and I'm just like, "What?"
Well, here's the thing.
I don't care either.
What she seems to be complaining about is really, in my opinion, just the circle of life. Each generation gets older, a new generation comes in. There's tension between the generations, and that's happened like literally with every parent-child generation ever in the history of the planet. That's not new. It's not unique. And I think that's where you see these people are so self-centered, that they think that the struggles they have with the generation ahead of them are unique in nature and have never happened to at any other point in history. And that's and to me that is very narcissistic.
It is. Well, that's the thing. I saw my grandparents' relationship very small because my great grandparents passed away when I was very young. Mm-hmm. But I saw my parents' relationship with their parents, and I watch other people, and it's the same thing every generation. I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know that I've seen as much contempt as I do now. No. There is such contempt for the baby boomer generation. And that is something new. My grandparents were not contemptuous of their parents. My parents were not contemptuous of their parents. I'm not contemptuous of my parents.
No,
But
well,
I'm astounded at just the utter contempt that some people have for their parent. And this is what I always say, two things. And I had a friend say this to me because I was young at one time, and my parents were idiots and horrible people because I was young. And I remember she told me, she said, I was complaining about my dad. She was 65 and at a place I worked, and I was complaining about my dad. And she said, wow, you must really hate yourself. And I said, what? She goes, well, you're the person your parents raised. Like, who you are is a result of them. And if they're such horrible people, you must truly be a horrible person. Because only horrible people would raise a horrible person. And I was like, oh. And I thought about that. I was like, oh. And that's the thing I started to realize is, I'm a result of their parenting. So if they're such horrific people, how did either I truly do hate myself, or how did I turn out so well? And so I always say, while my parents weren't perfect, for better or worse, I'm pretty happy with what they turned out, right?
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, I'm not gonna, be mad at them. So if you are self-loathing, and you want to blame your parents, go to therapy, because those are your feelings, and you're blaming them for what you have going on.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one thing that made me start thinking about, okay, this is, maybe I need to rethink how I'm looking at this. And the other is, I don't know why I expect my parents to be perfect human beings when I'm not. Children have the hardest time cutting their parents some slack. They want constant slack from their parents. Why can't they understand me? Why do they put these ridiculous expectations on me? I can never make them happy. And yet they turn around and do the exact same thing to their parents. If
Absolutely
your parents
true.
are not of the generation that is aware of that, but you are of the generation that is aware of it, then step up.
Absolutely.
Step up.
And the thing that I'll end on is there seems to be also the belief, and I think the way she says, after you've said somebody 4 or 5 times, can they really come back from that? Remember, the lower boundary for boomers is 1965. So those people will just be turning 60 next year. They're not demented. They're not senile. They're just normal middle-aged people. And what I'll say is, if I'm a 60-year-old man and somebody is trying to language police me and tells me 5 or 6 times to use a different word, if I'm not doing it, it's not because I've forgotten and I'm incapable. It's because I think you're stupid and I don't want to follow what you're ordering me to do. That's what it's about.
Yes,
it's not about. It's not about their.
Yes. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, heifer, I didn't live 60 years on this earth, so some little punk whose ass I wiped every day can tell me what I can and can't say. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, that's what I'm thinking to myself. So it's not that I don't get it, it's that I don't give a damn. That's what you're missing.
Right.
If you think the person I'm trained is going to tell me what I can and can't say, you've got another thing coming. That's not happening. Okay?
Exactly.
That's just not going to happen.
Exactly. So I'm glad we got to end on a positive note. I appreciate you guys watching. You were watching Beyond the Rubicon, and we'll see you in a few days.